Very good evening from Osaka. Thank you so much, Danielle, for joining me here tonight. Good
Hi.
morning to you. Danielle is in England.
Yes, I am. Lovely to be here. Thank you for the invitation.
Thank you very much for accepting that invitation.
Mm.
But before we start talking to Danielle, if you have not seen the first video or the introduction, let me just give you a very quick recap of why are we here. So, because I'm very much interested in coaching, I have got lots of people around me that are asking me lots of questions about coaching.
Mm.
People that either want to be coached, or people that actually want to become coaches. And so I decided that the best way for me to answer some of these questions will be to ask my three of my wonderful coaches to have an interview with me, have a conversation with me, and to answer some of these questions through these conversations. So that would be the reason why we are doing these interviews. So the first interview was with Victor Pierantoni. Victor is a performance coach. So he is really keeping his clients very much on track in regards to reaching the goals and reaching the vision and mission. So that's his mission in his coaching. We will be talking today to Danielle. Danielle was my first coach, and Danielle will be talking to us about why shall we pause our lives before the life does it for us. And
Mm.
then the third, the coaching conversation will be with Anna. Anna is also based in London, and Anna will be talking to us about spiritual coaching. Anna is a shaman and a consultant. And if you are asking, what does spirituality have to do with business? I'm
Mm.
sure you will find these conversations very, very interesting. And I think it's very important to say that all these three conversations are very much related to business and to the corporate world for a very simple reason. And that is because I have been functioning in this world for over 20 years. And I know that it's thousands, if not millions of us like me out there that go through the same challenges, through the same obstacles, through the same successes, and through the same failures. So I needed a help. I still need a help. And I thought some of you might need help as well. So please enjoy these conversations, ask questions, because they might be really, really, really helpful to you. We hope they will be helpful to you, definitely. So, Danielle, good morning to you in England. Danielle just,
Hi.
Danielle just bought they just bought a horse for her sister. I think that's awesome.
I think I'm still in shock about that.
Which is absolutely phenomenal. I love it.
Yes,
I
yes.
asked her last time, "What are you doing?" She's like, "I'm horse sitting." I was like, "What?" People normally do babysitting. She's doing
Yes,
horse sitting.
I'm doing horse sitting. Yeah.
So, as I said, I will pass over to Danielle to introduce herself. But I started working with Danielle 5 years ago, as I said, when I moved from Middle East to Asia, and I really had challenges with integrating into Asian culture, and I started having heavy anxieties at work and fear of failure. So this is how I got really, really, really desperate. I didn't know how to help myself, and a good angel, Danielle, walked into my life. So before we talk about that, I will pass to Danielle so that she can introduce herself to you. Why did she become a coach? What is her history? What was her journey? And how is she helping people these days? So
Mm.
Danielle, over to you.
Yeah, great, thank you. And I started coaching about 15 years ago now. So we would have been in the early days of coaching before it was, or certainly business coaching. I think at that time sports coaching was much more common and well known, but business coaching was still quite in its infancy and was quite rare. And it certainly wasn't the growing profession it is today. We've got over 50,000 coaches now who are registered with the ICF across the globe. So
Wow.
it's the fastest growing profession at this time. And when I started 15 years ago, it was like, what is this? It was
Yeah.
very unknown and people didn't really understand what coaching was about. So I joined at a really exciting time. And actually, when I began coaching, I'd had about 10 years of my own corporate career. I had taken some time off because I'd found this kind of world of coaching through my corporate job, and then I wasn't quite sure how I was going to make the transition into that being my work in corporate to that being my work for me as a career. So I took some time off, went traveling, and then came back and started working for a coaching company. And I spent a number of years building that company in the UK, Europe and Australia. I then went to Asia and set up their Asia business, which is why we had that connection of me understanding about the Asia culture. And I spent about 3 years living and working in Singapore and building the business across Asia Pacific for that period of time. So I have a very operational, hands-on business career, along with this, well, you mentioned the word spiritual, and along with this kind of deeply spiritual, transformational and kind of inner world work that I do in parallel with the kind of business work. So what then happened was that when I was in Asia, I thought I was trying to save the world. I was having a really great time.
Sorry, I'll just jump into it. This is exactly what Victor said last time. When he started coaching, he was going to save everybody, you know.
Yeah. Yeah, well, we have to learn somehow.
Yeah.
So I was working for a company that I really loved. I really believed in the vision. I really believed in the mission. I was passionate about the work I was doing, and I was building teams, delivering programs and getting great results. And I wasn't taking care of myself through that process. And it's one of the big things that practitioners have to learn, and also business leaders have to learn, actually, is how are you going to deliver the thing that you're most passionate about whilst you take care of yourself at the same time. And I've learned that I have to learn lessons the hard way, that I normally have to go right to the extreme of my learning before I get the message. And that's what happened for me in Singapore, was that I basically burnt out completely. I couldn't get out of bed one day. I was running a very high profile program. We had people flown in from all over the world, and on day 2 of 5 I literally couldn't show up and do the work. And I was in my 30s, so it wasn't, I was at the prime of my life, and I just didn't realize that anything was wrong. So at that point, when I burnt out, I asked someone to get my laptop for me. They brought it to my bedroom, and I carried on working for the rest of the week, even though I couldn't get out of bed. And so, I was living a very extreme life at that time, and had to then go into very extreme recovery.
Mm-hmm. So you then moved to England, did you quit the job, or did you take sabbatical, or what happened after that?
Yes, I remember my boss saying, "Do you think you need a holiday?" So I said,
"Oh, that's a bad question."
Radical idea.
If my boss is watching this, please don't ask me this question, because that means you do need holidays.
So, radical idea. Aren't I the one who's saving the world? Doesn't everything depend on me? What happens if I'm not here? So I went through all of that, and then I thought maybe I do need a holiday. So I took a week off, and I went back to the UK, and that week turned to 3 months, and it was totally unexpected for me. I wasn't intending, but I ended up in a total retreat. Just for context, the way that I had been working, I talk about the fact that I worked 6 till 3, and that was 6 a.m. till 3 a.m. and that was my daily rhythm, and that I was flying every week for 3 years. I would fly to a different country, and I'd be away from home, and so my lifestyle was very extreme, and I also partied quite hard as well. So by the time I went to take that week off, my body was in a really it had collapsed essentially without me even noticing that it had. So I needed 3 months to rest.
Did you have any signs? Were you aware of any signs that your body or your mind was giving you, but you were just ignoring them? Did you see it coming?
I get asked that a lot, and I think that there are definitely signs. And I think I chose to ignore them. So I definitely was aware that simple things like I was overweight. So I was carrying excess weight, particularly around the middle, which what I learned later is a sign that your adrenal glands are overworking, and you've got too much cortisol being presented in your body, which causes this kind of bigger belly, basically, this band around the waist. I would find that I'd be exhausted, but then at around 10 or 11 o'clock, I'd have this second burst of energy, and I could suddenly take on the world. So by midnight, I would be, just on fire, working really fast. And I didn't think that that was an issue. I didn't realize that that was a sign, again, that the adrenals were not functioning properly, and that they were sending me another burst of cortisol at the wrong time of the day. And that cortisol was then keeping me awake till 3 a.m. And so there were definitely signs. I had these sort of stabbing pains in my joints, and I just thought I was getting old, but quite honestly, I was in my 30s.
In your 30s, yeah.
I'm getting old.
Excuse me.
We can tell ourselves these stories, but when I had a live blood test, the guy showed me that it was these little crystals that had been forming in my blood, and the crystals were sharp, and that was spiking me from the inside. And that there were lots of signs, definitely. And I cried a lot. Just in a business meeting, I'd be sitting talking to my boss, and I would be in tears, which was quite beyond me, really. And they would be sort of sitting there looking at me and saying, "You okay?"
And as well, I think at that time, like maybe now it's a little bit different, but at that time, there is no connection. You're not supposed to cry in business. It just doesn't happen. Like, what's going on? So that must have been quite daunting.
Yeah.
Well, the signs that you're talking about, I am sure that so many people that are listening to this can relate to. I certainly can relate to them, to some of them. I am sure, I've had several burnouts in my life as well. So what is it that you now, through your practice, obviously 15 years later, and went through a long journey, but what is it that your practice is specializing on now?
Yeah. So just to say, the burnout was about 6 years ago, and I think the recovery has taken different phases. So there was the initial 3 months of that recovery, which was really resting and just resting mostly and resetting. And then actually I left the job that I was in and started my own business, and decided that I needed to be able to do the work that I do on my terms. So that was quite a significant change for me. And subsequently, that took about another 2 years really to recover from the situation that I had been in. And there were fundamental things that needed to be different in my lifestyle. My working hours needed to be shrunk right down, and the way that I ate, the way that I rested, who I socialized with, how I traveled, where my home base was, how I spent my free time, how I was able to switch off. How often are we just always on with the technology, and just learning how to take tech breaks and disconnect, and finding out what I needed for myself, like being in nature, writing, the things that were important for me in terms of my own life. So when you ask about my practice, are you asking about my sort of daily rhythm, or are you asking about my work practice?
Your work practice.
Yeah, my work. So what I do now is run my own business. I have a coaching and retreats business, and I'm also an author. So it actually, what has been amazing is that having had that burnout was probably one of the best things that ever happened.
It normally is, right? The bad things always lead to something new, good.
Not always, but in this instance, I think there's 2 ways that you can approach these situations. One is to take it and say, this is terrible and bad things always happen to me, and sort of be a victim of the circumstances. Or you can take the situation, you can say, what was I supposed to learn from this, and what do I need to do differently, and what is this actually teaching me? And that was the route that I decided to take with that experience, and learn how to live my life differently. So I created the Pause Retreats as an antidote, I suppose, to the busyness of everyday life. At the moment, the world outside of us is speeding up at an extreme rate. And most of us have forgotten the art of slowing down at all. And what we're seeing at the moment is increased levels of anxiety, increased levels of depression. And actually what I'm seeing is this is starting earlier and earlier and earlier. So, it's not just happening in later life or midlife. It's not just happening in the 20s. It's actually happening for young teenagers and also younger children as well. So we're seeing this increase and rise of anxiety and depression. The World Health Organization say that in 2020 that will be the world's most prevalent disease, and we're about 2 years away from that now.
Yeah, that's really, that's alarming number, really. Well, talking about that anxiety, at the beginning, I said that was the reason why I started searching for coach, because 5 years ago, I really did not know anything about coaching. But after we moved to Asia, and I was just really, the pressure was, expectations were massive. The pressure was massive on delivering the results and leading the team. And I said in my previous post, I have never, until that point, I never had a challenge with my confidence or with my drive or with anything really, fear of failure or anything like that. And all of the sudden, these kind of anxiety, the panic attacks came over me, and I just didn't know how to deal with them. And nobody knew about them, obviously, because of course I was ashamed to show them. So there would be few people that would, we would laugh about it very lightly, but nobody really understood what I was going through when I was laying at 3 o'clock in the morning in bed, staring at the ceiling and just having these massive attacks.
Like ventilating.
Yeah, like thinking the world is just going to collapse because I'm not going to reach the targets, for example, or I'm going to be laughed at, or I'm going to be a complete failure. So this is when I started looking for you, and I found you as my first coach. And here I would like to stop and talk about what we again spoke with Victor about last time. How important is it when somebody comes to you with these kind of challenges? How important is it that the person is completely open about what's going through them, what's going through their mind, through their body, how they feel? Because when I started with you, I was very, very closed. And I did not know how to open up to you. And I was even, like, what does this woman want from me? Even though I asked you for help, but I was like, I can't tell you, so how important is this, and how do you see it with your clients? Is it easy for us to open up about these things?
Yeah, I would say it's not important that people are open. I don't know how Victor answered that question, but for me, it's not important that people are open. What's important is that they show up. So if they're in difficulty, it's quite likely that they'll want to be closed and that they'll want to protect those vulnerable parts of themselves. And that's completely in many ways that's kind of sensible, right? That you'd want to take care of those parts of yourself. So well, my supervisor says to me the client can be as difficult as they want to be. That's entirely their right to do that. And then our job as coaches or as practitioners is to create a safe enough environment that over time, as people feel ready and they want to, then they're able to open up the parts of them that they feel safe to do that. But my job is not to force that or to make that happen quickly, and just to allow that process to unfold over time. And that's really the skill of what I bring and what I do.
And I remember we had one really memorable session that I will remember forever, when it kind of it just fell off me, and it was maybe fourth or fifth session. It really took me a time to let go, really, of everything. And I will remember that session. I just cried and cried and I cried, and I didn't really know why, but it's just like coming out. And that time I understood, my gosh, it's okay to let go.
Yes. And how did you feel afterwards?
It just felt like, really honestly, like somebody opened the cage and I just could fly out and
Mm.
and just be okay exactly as I am.
Yeah.
I think that was
That's it.
that was the biggest revelation.
Yeah, that's the work.
Yeah,
That is
exactly.
it. Very
That,
beautiful. I was working with somebody yesterday who's been working in corporate for 20 years and is on a significant journey, having left that and not totally sure what's coming next, and is really sort of trusting the path but not really knowing what the path is. And yesterday there was a big release and a big breakdown, and they were saying to me, I don't know why I've got all this emotion. I'm like, well, you haven't got to know why. It's inside of you, and most of the time what we're doing is battle with the emotion, is that we are trying to press it down inside of us and keep a lid on it. And most of us haven't been given a way to be able to express our emotions that feels safe for us. So we're either frightened of them, or most often we're frightened of them. We're often concerned that they might be damaging to other people, or that if it starts, it will never stop. That's one of the worries that people have about their emotions, or that they'll do some damage with them. So constantly this battle going on to keep the emotions pressed down, which is exhausting. And as leaders, your energy tank, how vital you are as a leader, is so critical, and using such a lot of energy to press your emotions down isn't sourcing you or fueling you. It's just tiring you.
Yeah, absolutely. In connection with the anxiety, what was I going to ask? So what are the most common anxieties that people face, or how would you recommend to deal with them? Let's say, obviously my recommendation really now, after everything I've learned, is to go and find help. But let's say people can't go and find help, or they can't afford it, or they don't know how, or whatever. How can people somehow help themselves with these kind of anxieties? What would be your advice on that?
Yeah, definitely. It's a big question. I would say, first of all, to understand that the mind and the body are connected. So what you're thinking and how you're feeling are not two separate things. And that for most of us, we'll have this sort of inner dialogue that is running in our minds that we may or may not be able to hear. So some people can hear it very clearly, and other people have to listen a little bit harder to be conscious of it. But this dialogue is often fueling how we feel, and then vice versa. How we're feeling is then fueling the increased dialogue. And often the dialogue in our minds is critical, judgmental, and unkind. So we have to start listening to, what are we telling ourselves? Like, what are the accusations that are happening in our mind? And start to be able to find a way to just let those settle down a little bit. If there's a lot of emotion, one of the things that, particularly with anxiety, one of the things that will happen is that the breath will be very high up in the chest. So people find that they can get the breath here. They can't really get it past the top of the chest, and certainly not down into the stomach. So if somebody's feeling anxious, the thing that I always recommend is to breathe. And that will also help with the mind-body connection, to be able, the breath is the bridge between the two. So breathing deeply, either 3 or 10 deep breaths, is always a really useful way of managing anxiety, which you can do in a meeting. You can do it, when you're with a team. Nobody needs to know you're doing that. It's a very practical thing. Actually shifting your state, so your position, yes, your actual physiology. And I seem to remember we talked about this as well, that when you're frightened or anxious or feeling apprehensive, your body will be conditioned to sit in a particular pattern, or stand in a particular pattern. So you have to notice, like, what's your fear response physiologically in your body, and then start to make little adjustments. So it might be that you kind of put your shoulders back. It might be that you drop deeper down into your hips. It might be that you plant your feet more squarely on the floor. It might be that you put your chin up. Just noticing what your body needs in order to kind of just recalibrate the physiological standpoint. That can be very useful. Lavender oil, I don't have any here at the moment, but you can buy little bottles of lavender oil, and you can have it sitting on your desk or in your bag, and 1 or 2 drops in your hands. It's an essential oil that can go directly onto the skin, which others need to be diluted, but lavender can go straight on the skin. 1 or 2 drops, rub it into your hands, inhale it, and that will instantly bring, you can feel it's like triggered.
Straight away, yeah.
I'm imagining that. And another really simple thing that I think people in business can do is something I call white space. So if you look at your diary for the next week, it's likely that your meetings are back to back all the way through the week, and that there isn't any space even for meal break. And I would recommend that all leaders reprioritize their diary with some white space. So it may be that you shorten your meetings, so you make your meetings 50 minutes instead of 60 minutes, or 20 minutes instead of 30 minutes, so that you have a window of space between them, because you've got to move probably from location to location. You may need a bathroom break, you may need to go and rehydrate and get some water. So simple things like that, a little bit of white space in between your meetings will go a very long way to just calming that anxiety where you're rushing from one thing to the next without any space to digest what just happened, what are my next steps, what are my actions, who do I need to delegate what to, and all of that just piles up throughout the day. It's like a steam train.
Talking on those, I will just introduce, if you allow me, your book that came out a few months ago.
Yes.
Let me just show you like this. Can you see? Yeah, pause. Okay. So this is a really, I absolutely love that book. Really, congratulations on this. It's just so beautiful. It's, and you will tell us what it is about, but I just found it so practical in really practical steps on how to deal with different situations when we feel overwhelmed, anxiety, or whatever it is. But as well, I found it, and I wrote this to you, I think in the message that I sent to you, I found it very pretty, like very pleasing on the eye. It's not just the book. It's really, it goes with that whole experience of calming down. And when you have time, you take this book and you lit the candle and you drink your tea and you just really take time for yourself. And I love that. Thank you very much for your wish in here, which says in here, Dear Michaela, in one nothing, something happens. And that is just so true, isn't it? It's just so true. So can you just tell the guys that are watching this, what did you try to do with this book? Why did you write it? And who is it for?
The book was written for people who wouldn't come on a retreat, or didn't have the the time to be able to come onto the retreat, or the resources to come onto a retreat. Some people have got family responsibilities, financial commitments, that sort of thing, that meant that taking 5 days out to go on a pause retreat wasn't going to be possible. So it was essentially written for anybody who had the need to pause, there it is, but wasn't going to be able to make it on a retreat. And what I really wanted to do was give people a sense of the landscape of pausing. What does this really mean, as you say, on a practical basis? So I'm somebody who's really busy. I'm somebody who's juggling competing commitments. I'm trying to be, a husband and father, or a wife and a mother, and a business owner, or a business leader. And, I'm trying to be a daughter and a sister, and, all of these other things that I'm trying to be in my life. And how do I practically integrate the idea of pausing and slowing down into my life? And why would I need to even consider doing that? Like, why would that be necessary? Why would that be valuable? Why would that be important? So, it was written for anyone who thought they might be on the brink of burnout, and anybody who didn't want to be.
Yeah, there is, I marked here one of the many sentences, but I love this one. I believe that unless we actively create natural pauses for ourselves in this hectic and driven world, we feel anxious, unfulfilled, stressed, and unwell.
That's right.
And the word unfulfilled, I think it's another big thing, and probably the word purpose in here is
Yes.
because another thing that happens these days to us is we run, we drive, we strive to be the best, and then one day we wake up and ask why.
What was it about? Yeah.
Yes,
So
what is it
I
about?
think that the busyness can sometimes be a mask for things that may not be working for us in our lives, and I know I certainly have this tendency myself, is I'll get busy doing, because it's far more comfortable than
Yeah.
addressing the emotional
Issues.
issue that might be
Yes.
going on instead. It's like
Don't
an
ask me,
easy.
I'm busy. I'm
Yeah,
busy.
exactly. Yes, it's that famous clipboard, isn't it? If I've got a
Yeah.
clipboard and I can't disturb me.
Efficient.
So yeah, I think that the busyness can be a cover-up sometimes, and that that part of what is confrontational about pausing is that when you slow down, you actually have to start meeting some of the bigger questions that you've been avoiding inside of yourself. So at the Deep Pause, which is one of the retreats I run in the UK, in Cornwall, we spend 5 days considering what are the questions. So we don't even begin to think about answers. We don't even look at answers.
Yeah.
Everybody's so busy trying to find the answer to their lives without pausing and considering, what are the questions I'm trying to ask? Like, what matters to me at this point in my life? Because the other thing we have to take into account is we go through different stages of our lives, and at each different life stage there are different requirements and different desires and different needs and different ambitions. So how do you keep recalibrating where you are on the path, so that life doesn't have to go bang, okay, I need to stop you now, like it did with me, and course correct me.
Yeah, absolutely. I would say, in my experience, and I have been probably last year or so, I've been really, really focusing on really connecting and understanding, what am I about? What is the life about? What is going on? And as you wrote in here, in one nothing, something happens. That stillness, meditation, and spending time in nature, it's just really opened the whole world, new world to me, which I didn't even know existed. Really, truly, I knew it was there somewhere, but you hear a lot of stuff, but until you really stop and consciously, really, really just take the time for yourself, it's not going to happen. But once you do stop, and once you do practice it on regular basis, it will come. The answers will come, and sometimes it might take years. Sometimes it might take weeks. Who knows? Everybody's journey is different. But unless we do stop, that purpose, the answer to the question why and what is my purpose, will not come.
Why am I here?
Absolutely. Do people, how is the question of purpose with your clients? Does it come up a lot? Is it a question that people in our busy lives, do we ask that a lot?
I think often that question comes later for people. In the first instance, they're asking kind of more practical questions, I think, like, how do I spend more time with my family? How do I get the next promotion? How do I deal with this difficult relationship that's showing itself? How do I get my team to follow me in a way that means I don't have to babysit them all the time? So I think, how do I get the results that I'm looking for? How do I lead the vision? So people are often asking those sorts of more practical questions.
How questions.
The how questions. And then the why am I here question, which is essentially the purpose question, I think gets attended to when people have had some time to address those practical things that are at the front of mind. And what I know in my experience in the last 15 years of coaching is that the thing that somebody brings to coaching is not normally the thing that they really want to work on, but they don't know that yet. And so the thing that they bring is very real to them, because that's what is in their consciousness. And the work that I do with people allows them over time to communicate what's in the unconscious, and to start to then go into these more I think, spiritual questions of why am I here, and what is my life about, and that is essentially the work that I do. So yes, I do get a lot of those questions, but they don't normally present themselves in that way to begin with.
Yeah. Well, what about intuition? Obviously, intuition a massive, massive, massive thing. What about intuition in the business world?
Yes, highly underrated.
Mm.
Highly underrated, because the world at the moment has the way that things are operating is based on kind of facts and data, and logic and science, essentially, and a lot of people have lost the fact, or lost the understanding, that intuition is data. Because it's less tangible, you can't touch it, it's a sense, it's a feeling, it's a knowing, it's a, you can't quite grasp it sometimes.
You can't get the ROI on that.
No, and you can't back it with a, a fact.
Excel sheet, yes.
Exactly. You can't back it with a fact. And so leaders have discounted their intuition. And one of the things that we're working on, taking the pause into business, is actually how do you come back to a place where you can create pockets of stillness. We also know leaders need to have activity, and not, they can't be pausing all of the time. You need to be, there needs to be momentum forward as well as still points. But in those pockets where there are still points, how can you allow yourself to settle into your intuition and let that guide the next decision, the next step? Or equally, if you are able to tune into your intuition and there's nothing there, that there's no action that needs to be taken right now, how can you trust that, rather than playing and messing around with things that don't actually need to be adjusted or changed at all? How can you use your intuition for the bigger context of what's going on in a business, to know, what is the direction and the future that the business might need to follow, and respond to what's going on in the outer world? So we're very interested in helping leaders be able to connect into their instincts and their intuition, and start being able to use it to make subtle or significant shifts in the organizational system. But at the moment, highly underrated.
And I must agree there with you. I think for leadership, intuition is, and again, it's a journey, right? For everybody, you do need to learn, first of all, how to let go and how to trust that gut feeling, and that yes, not everything is going to be backed up by numbers and by Excel sheets, but the intuition, especially in leadership, is just, it's irreplaceable.
It's what will separate a good leader from an outstanding leader. It's somebody who can really tune into that intuition and trust it and be guided by it. And that comes from having experience of knowing that your intuition works, which is quite an interesting thing, because you then have to go through cycles of trusting it and not trusting it, and seeing what happens when you've done both. If I didn't trust it on one occasion, what was the consequence or the effect of that? If I did trust it on another occasion, what was the benefit and the the experience of doing that? So that is a process that we can teach some skills, but then people have to go and practice.
You have to let go,
and experience,
and let it work. Well, talking about this, trying and testing what works, what not works, what doesn't work, is also obviously failure in our everyday life comes into really everyday life, right? What happens, that's part of our growth, it's part of what happens, it's part of our business decisions, and we do fail. And still the fear of failure is so huge in all of us. And again, we need to learn how to deal with that. Why do you think that fear of failure is so massive? Why?
It's a great question.
Because it's not like we are brain surgeons, right? It's nobody's gonna die. Hopefully, in the normal business, I mean, it's nothing. The things are not going to fall apart completely. Why is it such a threat to us?
Well, my answer's probably slightly left of field on this, but I think what happens is that if we have anxiety inside of us. It will already be inside of us. And then the anxiety has to latch onto something. Do you remember I spoke about the mind and body connection? So what happens is that the mind gives the anxiety something to hang on to, and failing's a pretty good
easy. It's an easy one.
Yeah, so the anxiety, you can just like suck onto it like something, you know, sticking onto glass, and they get connected in that way. It's simply that the anxiety needs a place to go. So that's a really obvious place that the mind can send the anxiety to, I think. The actual reality or failing is probably minimal for most people, but I also think we're set up in a culture now where we're supposed to get things right really quickly. So the idea of learning through mistakes, the idea of learning through getting things wrong, through trial and error, is much less common these days. It's about, you know, get the facts, get the data, get the information, get it right. You know, get it right first time, essentially. And I was working on a business program at the beginning of this week with a group of people, and we were doing a creative process to get some ideas, and it was amazing how trapped people were getting because they wanted to get it right first time. And I was like, you know what, you've got to put some shit on the page first. Like, you've got to get it wrong, it's got to be messy, and you just have to be okay with the discomfort of it not being polished and perfect to start with, and allow yourself that as part of the creative process, and eventually you'll find some gold. But we're so conditioned, I think, that we have to get it right first time, and it's not helpful. We need to have freedom to express, to try things, to create, to make a mess, to you know, get it wrong, and then know that we're held through that process, and as you
supported,
say, that we're supported.
I think it's a very, and this is where the leadership comes into play, right? Because if you do have that support around you, you will not get so wound out about it, right? You're going to be open about it. And for anybody who's going through anxieties, and I really did have a fair share of them, my recommendation really is to, whatever is going inside, to share. And you know, my fear of failure was always not reaching the targets, right? And I would always keep it inside me. So I wouldn't even share the facts, you know, not to even show that there is a possibility of not reaching that, for example. So it would just build up and build up and build up. And funny enough, actually today we had a conversation, and at the moment I've got such a great environment around me that I really feel I can share everything, really how it is, and I know it's gonna be okay. But we're still going to try the hardest to reach what we need to reach, but without anxiety, as one team. And it's going to be much better energy than if I was scared and then everybody else would be scared, because I know so much about anxiety, I can see it in other people as well.
Right.
You see, so it's very catchy. So to have that environment, for any leader that you are there, please watch your teams and watch the cry for help from them, and that intuition comes in, right, as well.
I liked what you said. Anxiety is very catchy.
That's what I see.
It's like wildfire.
It's like a flu. Anyway, I think we could have long discussion about this and with many people, I'm sure. Before we go, because we are running out of time, can we just let us know a little bit more about your retreats? And what can people get out of them? How can they find you as well? Where can they find you, and where can they learn more about them?
Yeah, absolutely. So you can find me online at lifebydanielle.com, and the retreats are called the Pause Retreats. So these are retreats that are open to the public. This year we have a deep pause, which is a 5-day retreat in Cornwall in the UK for people who are feeling pretty exhausted, burnt out, you know, just need to have some nurture and some time to recalibrate where they are and ask some questions about life. I have a sacred pause, which is a 5-day retreat in Bali. This is a spiritual quest for anybody who's interested in the bigger questions about themselves and their life. And yeah, we use the body as the way into the exploration. So we use local Balinese rituals, hands-on healing, different practices to be able to go deeper into the spiritual self. And then in February next year, we have a 10-day retreat, which is in Italy, which is called the Pure Pause, which is a detox retreat, but the detox with a difference, because most detoxes you go and you starve yourself and just drink juice or whatever, but actually we use this as a detox which is with food. So you eat 3 meals a day, and then the cleanse happens through herbs and through qigong and through acupuncture and through yoga and through nature. So we go for a different route for the clearing process in the body, and we're looking for a spiritual cleanse as well as a physical and emotional cleanse as well. So there's all sorts of different programs that we offer. There's sort of something for everybody really. We've got a wild pause, which is going out camping and kayaking. It's not everybody's kind of cup of tea, but it's a really great
Me
like that. Yeah.
I love that. Yeah.
Okay, yeah, camping, kayaking, paddleboarding. We have a great fun weekend, kind of really close to nature in that one. We eat around the fire and sit under the stars, and
awesome.
it's really lovely. So each retreat has different benefits. Each retreat has a different reason for being. There's more information on the website about them, or people can email me, Danielle at lifebydanielle.com, and I can answer any questions. What else did you ask me?
Basically where can people find you? So we will put the website and your email address as well down to the video, so people can look it up if they have any questions. Well, this went really fast. I'm looking at the clock. We are actually over our limit that we set up for ourselves. I could talk to you forever.
We have a lot to say, I think.
Yes, absolutely. So Danielle, thank you so very much. And I said last time as well, who knows, we might do continuation of this maybe or after a few weeks or few months we will see how it goes. But I think this is very, very helpful for a lot of people that are scared or do not know where to find the resources to questions. Thank you so very much. Anything that you would like to say to people watching before we wrap up?
Just that you're doing great. Keep going.
Thank you. I feel great. I have to say, I feel the best I have done in many, many, many years. So you look as well. When I come to England, I'm going to see your horse.
Yes, I look forward to introducing Bob to you.
Perfect. Okay, thank you, Danielle. Speak to you very, very soon. Thanks so much. Bye.